Hey guys, tonight we settle beside a fire that flickers like it knows secrets. The air is cool, almost sharp, and every spark that jumps skyward feels like a tiny messenger racing to tell the stars what you're whispering down here. The circle is small, just you, shadows, and a few tired faces leaning closer as the night grows thick. Outside this ring of light, the world is vast, dark, and a little terrifying. Inside, though, inside, you feel the first heartbeat of belief. It starts as a story, a hush, a warning. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes here. Saber-toothed cats aren't known for respecting personal space. But tonight, you get to watch from the safest seat in history. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Midnight in Manila? Sunrise in Seattle? I love knowing which corner of the planet is keeping me company tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The shaman's voice trembles like smoke, rising and curling until it feels alive. You lean closer. He's describing a bird that never dies. Wings wide enough to blot out the sun. When it beats those wings, thunder rolls. When it cries, rain falls. The children around you cling to their parents. Is it real? Doesn't matter, because believing it just might keep them alive through the next storm. Here's the thing. These early tales aren't entertainment. They're survival manuals dressed up in myth. Thunder isn't random. It's the echo of wings. Death isn't an end. It's a curtain. Hunt failed? Must have skipped an offering. Hunt succeeded. The gods were pleased. Simple, terrifying, reassuring. And here's your mainstream fact of the night. Cave paintings, like those in Lascaux, France, go back more than 30,000 years. Horses, bison, deer, all drawn not just as art, but as ritual. Some scholars say they were early prayers painted in ochre, an attempt to trap the spirit of the hunt. Others wonder if shamans made them while in trance, sketching visions that felt as real as the cave around them. But want a strange little twist? Thousands of years later in Egypt, people actually use crocodile dung as contraception. Yeah, try explaining that on a first date. Historians still argue whether practices like these were sacred, practical, or just the result of someone saying, "Hey, let's try this once." You catch the rhythm of the chant now. Steady, low, almost hypnotic. The shadows shift on the walls, stretching into shapes. Animals leaping, ancestors gesturing, spirits sliding, just out of reach. For a moment, you wonder if belief isn't just born from fear, but from the human need for pattern, for story. Why does the sun return each day? Why do floods come and go? If someone can answer those questions, even with a wild tale, suddenly they're not just a storyteller, they're a leader. And maybe that's the secret hook of religion. It doesn't just keep you safe, it makes the world feel less random, which, let's be honest, is still the number one reason you compulsively check your weather app. You hear a ripple of laughter around the fire as a child asks why the gods would care about what humans eat or wear. The shaman pauses, leans in, and says something you can't quite catch. Whatever it was, it silences everyone. That's power, the kind that pulls you in, even when you don't believe a word of it. Imagine being the first skeptic, the one who mutters, "Maybe the sky isn't angry, maybe it's just clouds." Awkward silence. Next thing you know, you're on permanent wolf watch duty. Congratulations, you've just invented philosophy and unemployment at the same time. But here's what keeps you hooked. Religion at this stage is elastic. A storm rolls in, boom, new god. A volcano erupts. Say hello to the fire spirit. The system stretches and shifts like smoke itself. You can't see it clearly, but you know it's there, wrapping around you. As the chant slows, so does your breath. The fire dwindles into embers, and the night presses closer. You realize this is just the beginning. From here, these fragile sparks of belief will grow into pyramids, ziggurats, temples, cathedrals, and digital sermons streamed at 4K. But right now, it's only a voice, a fire, and a story holding back the dark. And somehow, that's enough. The fire fades, and your journey drifts with the river. You're no longer pressed inside a cave. Now you're sitting in a boat sliding across the Nile, the world's slowest and most patient highway. The water glimmers under the moonlight. Reeds whisper against the current, and in the distance, a jackal howls like a reminder that life is short and the gods are always listening. Egypt breathes differently. Here, belief isn't just whispered around fires. It's baked into every brick, every loaf of bread, every bead of jewelry. You can almost smell the honey cakes left on a shrine, sticky offerings meant to bribe eternity. The gods are everywhere. Ra rides the sky each morning in his solar bark, glowing smugly like the world's first celebrity influencer. Isis weaves protection with magic that makes even the hardest battles bend. Anubis, half jackal, half grim, guidance counselor, waits to weigh your heart against a feather when you die. That test? No retakes. Fail it, and your soul gets devoured by Ammit, the part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus goddess, who sounds like she was designed by committee. Daily life is an endless exchange with these deities. You grind grain? Thank Osiris. You pray the Nile floods just enough, but not too much? Pray harder. Even cats get worshipped. Bastet, sleek and smug, basically turned the Egyptians into history's first cat memes. Owning one was sacred. Harming one? You might find yourself mobbed by neighbors, with less chill than a modern comment section. And here's your mainstream fact. Temples weren't just holy places. They were economic powerhouses. The Temple of Amun at Karnak, for example, owned land, collected taxes, and employed thousands. Think of it less like a church and more like a combination Walmart, court, and government office with a side order of chanting priests. Still, there were quirks. For instance, ancient contraceptives in Egypt sometimes included, brace yourself, honey, acacia leaves, and even crocodile dung. Yes, again with the dung. Apparently, they couldn't get enough of that stuff. Historians still argue whether it was genuinely effective or just a very uncomfortable placebo. Either way, it proves that human creativity often peaks when survival is at stake. Imagine yourself walking through an Egyptian market. Baskets of figs, jars of beer, linen flapping in the breeze. Over there, a scribe mutters curses at his reed pen while copying hymns to Thoth. Children chase each other past statues so tall they blot out the sky. Everywhere, amulets dangle from necks, tiny scarabs, eyes of Horus, charms against the kind of bad luck you don't want to test. Faith here isn't a separate weekend activity. It's the Wi-Fi connection of existence. Invisible, but absolutely necessary. You're led into a temple, cool stones swallowing the desert heat. Torches flicker, incense smolders, sharp and sweet. Priests chant in measured tones, words echoing so long you forget where the sound begins. The ceilings soar like a forest of stone, painted with stars and suns. You feel small, deliberately small, because that's the point. The gods are vast, and you are mortal, and scale itself becomes part of worship. Here comes a debate. Historians still argue whether ordinary Egyptians truly believed the elaborate theology their priests taught, or if much of it was ritual habit. Offer food, say the prayer. Don't overthink it. Were they deeply pious, or just following cultural scripts, like you muttering, "Bless you," after a sneeze? The truth probably lives in the middle, as it often does. A joke slips in, because imagine some farmer sighing, "Great, Ra needs more prayers today. I already left bread yesterday." It's the same energy as complaining about software updates. Just when you think you're good, boom, new ritual patch. At night, you lie back on a mud brick roof, the stars sharp above you, the river gliding below. Belief seeps into your skin like the desert wind. It's practical, yes, but it's also comforting. Tomorrow the sun will rise again, Ra's ship sailing across the heavens, and you'll live another day inside a world where gods explain everything from floods to fleas. You close your eyes, and the Nile carries you forward, always forward, toward more stories. The Nile's gentle rocking fades, and you feel your feet sink into the dust of another land, Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates coil like restless serpents, sometimes giving life with fertile soil, sometimes sweeping away whole villages in one bad-tempered flood. You trudge through streets of sun-baked brick, where the air smells of clay and grain, and you can almost taste the beer bubbling in wide jars nearby. Here, religion towers above you, literally, in the form of ziggurats, those massive step pyramids reaching toward a sky that seems far too vast to be empty. You stand at the base of one, craning your neck as the stairs disappear into the clouds. Priests in bright robes climb slowly, carrying baskets of food, flowers, and maybe the occasional unlucky goat, all meant to catch the attention of gods perched higher than humans could ever reach. You can hear the low hum of chants rising, blending with the dust and heat, until the whole city feels wrapped in prayer. Ziggurats aren't just buildings. They're cosmic elevators, designed to bring mortals a little closer to the divine. And you're the wide-eyed traveler, following the rhythm upward, heart thumping with curiosity. Here's your mainstream fact. The city of Ur, one of Mesopotamia's great centers, held a ziggurat dedicated to the moon, god Nana. It wasn't just a shrine. It was the spiritual anchor of the whole city, shaping its calendar, its rituals, even its sense of identity. When people looked up at that glowing step pyramid, they didn't just see architecture, they saw order in a chaotic world. But here's the quirky part. Mesopotamians believed in personal gods, like a divine buddy system. Everyone had a spirit protector who could whisper guidance or, if ignored, throw a heavenly tantrum. Imagine telling your friend, "Sorry, can't hang out. My personal god is in a mood today." Historians still argue whether this system meant people felt closer to the divine or simply more terrified of offending their assigned cosmic supervisor. The markets buzz with omens. A merchant unwraps a clay tablet, cuneiform wedges pressed into it like neat rows of bird tracks. A scribe mutters about the alignment of stars, warning that tonight's eclipse is definitely bad news for kings. You pass a woman sprinkling flour before her door to ward off demons, and a soldier polishing his sword while muttering the name of Marduk, Babylon's chief god, as if that alone sharpens the blade. Religion here is thick, practical, and inescapable. It clings like the mud on your sandals. You pause at the edge of the river, watching fishermen haul nets. One laughs about how Enki, the trickster water god, sometimes blesses the catch, sometimes ruins it. The joke makes the rounds. He's probably busy arguing with Inanna again. Even divine soap operas have their fan clubs. And honestly, if you've ever binge-watched a drama at 3 a.m., you know the vibe. At night, the city glows with torchlight. You hear a lull of prayers, half plea, half lullaby. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere else, a priest declares that the gods are satisfied. For now. But there's always a whisper of unease. The rivers may rise too high. Enemies may breach the walls. Plagues may sweep through. Belief here is less about peace and more about bargaining. You don't worship to feel good. You worship to stay alive. Still, you can't shake the awe. Looking up at that massive ziggurat in the starlight, you wonder, did the people truly believe their offerings reached the heavens? Or was the towering structure itself enough? A statement that humans could build their way into divine notice. Historians still argue whether the architecture was more about piety or power. But standing here, the distinction feels meaningless. Faith and ambition are fused into every stone. A final joke slips in as you shuffle away. Imagine the poor soul assigned to sweep those endless temple stairs. Day after day, broom in hand, grumbling, sure, the gods live up there, but do they ever help carry the groceries? Even in the most sacred places, humanity finds its humor. And so, the chants echo long after you leave, tugging you forward. The rivers glisten under the moon, the ziggurats fade into silhouettes, and you walk on, deeper into the human habit of worship. The journey stretches ahead, waiting, calling, promising more gods, more doubts, more stories. The dust of Mesopotamia fades, and now you hear the steady rush of water, endless, timeless. The Ganges flows before you, silver under the sun, wide and alive with voices. You walk barefoot along its banks, toes sinking into wet earth, the air thick with incense smoke, and the scent of butter lamps flickering in shrines. The river doesn't just give water, it gives identity, story, and a sense that you are a drop in something infinite. People bow, scoop water into their hands, and let it slip through their fingers as if touching the divine itself. Here, words matter almost more than actions. Priests chant Vedic hymns, syllables so old they sound like vibrations carved out of the universe. You listen, the rhythm hypnotic, and realize that in this world, sound is sacred. The syllables aren't just poetry, they're power. The idea is simple. If you speak the right words in the right way, the cosmos listens, and reality bends. It's religion as music, as mathematics, as breath. Mainstream fact. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest known texts in human history, was composed around 1500 BCE. For centuries, it wasn't written down, but passed orally from priest to priest with terrifying precision. Imagine memorizing thousands of lines, word for word, no cheat sheet allowed. And you thought cramming for exams was rough. Here's a quirky tidbit. Vedic rituals often involved a drink called soma. We don't actually know what soma was. Maybe a mushroom, maybe a plant, maybe just the ancient world's version of a mysterious energy drink. But it was consumed to connect with the gods. Picture a priest mid-chant, eyes glazed, suddenly bursting with cosmic confidence, shouting, "I've totally figured out the universe, guys." Historians still argue whether soma was a hallucinogen, a stimulant, or something symbolic. But either way, it had quite the reputation. You watch as families gather near the water. A father whispers to his son about dharma, duty, the cosmic law that says everyone has a role to play, from kings to farmers to wandering ascetics. A mother sprinkles petals onto the river, hoping for blessings. The line between the sacred and the ordinary blurs. Washing clothes, offering prayers, and preparing for funerals all flow together in this endless current. Religion here isn't a separate box in life. It is life. The ritual fires burn. The crackle of wood and hiss of ghee poured into flames rising toward the sky. You lean closer, feeling the heat, watching smoke curl upward as though carrying prayers like text messages to the gods. Somewhere in the chanting, you hear the concept of Rita, the cosmic order. It's the idea that everything, from stars spinning to rivers flowing, is stitched together by unseen rules. Keep the rituals, honor your duties, and the order holds. Ignore them, and chaos peeks in like an uninvited guest at the world's longest dinner party. But here's a funny aside. Imagine being the guy responsible for lighting the sacred fire, and one day, you just can't get the wood to catch. Everyone stares. Silence grows. You cough nervously, mutter, maybe the gods are testing me, and hope nobody notices the sweat dripping down your back. Even in the most serious faiths, someone has to strike the flint. As the chants continue, you feel your breath sinking with the rhythm. Each word is a ripple. Each pause is a wave. You're carried along, part of a language older than empires, older than written history, and yet the questions remain the same. Who are we? Why are we here? How do we keep chaos at bay? Historians still argue whether the Vedic religion was truly about spiritual truth or simply a complex system to preserve social order. But standing here, you realize it doesn't matter. The power is in the experience, the sound, the surrender to something bigger than yourself. The sun dips lower, turning the river gold. Bells ring from a temple. Children laugh. Priests continue their chants without pause. The world feels woven together, not just by stories, but by rhythm. You close your eyes, the drone of hymns wrapping around you, and drift deeper into the story of belief, carried forward like a leaf on the river's endless surface. The river's song fades into wind, and suddenly you're standing where marble columns pierce the sky. Greece spreads around you, all light and shadow, all chatter and argument. The sea shimmers in the distance, gulls cry overhead, and the air is thick with olive oil, wine, and the faint whiff of goat. You wander through a temple courtyard, the stones warm under your feet, and hear voices echoing between pillars, prayers, questions, and the occasional laugh, because the Greek gods are anything but boring. Here, the divine feels less like distant kings and more like dramatic neighbors. Zeus throws lightning bolts with suspiciously poor aim. Athena grants wisdom, but also serious attitude. Aphrodite turns hearts upside down for fun, while poor mortals stumble into tragedies that playwrights turn into hits at the amphitheater. You can't help but notice. These gods are flawed, moody, and entertaining. Basically, a cosmic soap opera with better costumes. Mainstream fact, the Oracle at Delphi was one of the most influential religious institutions in the ancient world. Leaders traveled across Greece to ask questions, and priestesses delivered cryptic answers, often while inhaling vapors rising from cracks in the earth. Was it divine inspiration or ancient geology playing tricks? Historians still argue Whether the oracle's trance came from genuine spirituality or just natural gas leaks, either way, her answers shaped wars and politics for centuries. A quirky tidbit: Spartans, those famously tough warriors, weren't above quirky rituals. They believed that whipping young boys at the altar of Artemis Orthia tested courage and endurance. Imagine a god demanding, "Prove your loyalty by..." Ouch, okay, keep going. It sounds brutal, but crowds actually gathered to watch. The ancient world had some questionable ideas of entertainment, though to be fair, so does ours. You stroll past a marketplace where philosophers lean on columns, debating everything from virtue to whether beans have souls. Socrates, that stubborn gadfly, asks endless questions, driving everyone mad. Someone groans. Here he goes again. You can almost hear him muttering, "The unexamined life is not worth living," while his students roll their eyes. Religion here doesn't just live in temples. It collides with philosophy, drama, and politics until the whole society buzzes with divine gossip and human doubt. A group gathers by a small shrine, offering honey cakes to Hermes, hoping their trade journeys go smoothly. Nearby, an athlete rubs oil on his arms, whispering a quick prayer to Nike for victory. The gods don't just rule heaven, they referee daily life. And yet, there's space here for skepticism. Some shrug at sacrifices, saying, "Well, it can't hurt." Others openly wonder if the gods care at all. It's a society where faith and doubt coexist like bickering roommates. Picture this. You climb the steps of the Parthenon, the temple to Athena, its columns massive, its statues gleaming. The city spreads below, the Aegean glitters beyond, and you feel what every visitor must have felt: small, reverent, but also proud. This is not just religion, it's identity carved in stone. To worship here is to belong to a civilization that believes it can reach the heights of gods and still laugh at their flaws. And of course, there's always humor. Imagine a fisherman tossing a fish back into the sea, muttering, "Poseidon, buddy, don't get mad, I'm just not hungry today." Or an Athenian husband saying to his wife, "If Zeus can get away with it, why can't I?" Cue thunder rumbling ominously in the distance. Historians still argue whether the Greeks genuinely believed their gods were real, or whether mythology was simply a cultural framework, a shared set of stories to explain and entertain. Standing here, though, among temples and debates, you sense it was both. Belief was flexible, playful, and yet deeply woven into civic pride. As the sun sinks behind Mount Parnassus, the columns glow gold, the sea darkens, and you feel the pull forward again. The laughter of gods, the chants of priests, and the endless questions of philosophers fade into night. You step onward, curiosity tugging at you, because this journey through faith has only just begun. The laughter of Greek philosophers fades, and you find yourself surrounded by the echo of sandals striking stone streets. Rome stretches before you, loud and busy, a city of marble and dust where every corner hides a shrine. You walk through the forum, columns towering, the air buzzing with merchants shouting prices and senators muttering deals. In the middle of it all, priests prepare offerings, smoke curling into the sky, as if Rome itself needs a daily reminder to keep the gods on their side. Here, religion is less a private whisper and more a public performance. Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva sit at the top of the divine pecking order. But honestly, the Romans didn't stop there. Every river, crossroads, and household hearth had its own spirit to appease. You could barely sneeze without worrying you'd offended some minor deity of nasal passages. And if you weren't careful, better light another candle. Mainstream fact. State religion in Rome was deeply tied to politics. The famous Pontifex Maximus, chief priest of Rome, wasn't just a spiritual role, but a political powerhouse. Julius Caesar himself once held the title, using it to strengthen his image as much as any military victory. Religion and government weren't separate. They were the same play, performed on two stages. And here's a quirky tidbit. Roman soldiers worshipped Mithras, a foreign god whose cult involved secret rituals in underground temples. One part of initiation, eating a meal that symbolized slaying a bull. Imagine telling your family, "Sorry, can't come to dinner. I have to go underground and reenact bovine sacrifice." Historians still argue whether Mithraism nearly rivaled Christianity before fading. But the secrecy only makes it more intriguing. You step into a bustling street where a procession winds past. Garlands, chants, drums beating steadily. People toss flowers toward a statue of Isis. Yes, that Isis, imported straight from Egypt. Rome was like the first global city, a sponge for foreign gods. If a deity looked impressive enough, Rome welcomed them into the pantheon like a new VIP. Of course, some senators grumbled, "Another god? Really? We don't even have enough priests for the ones we've got." As night falls, you slip into a small household. The family gathers around a lararium, a little shrine glowing in the corner. Tiny figurines of protective spirits watch over the room. Bread, fruit, and wine are offered, whispered prayers filling the silence. For Romans, the divine wasn't only in massive temples, it was in kitchens, bedrooms, and doorways, woven into the fabric of daily routine. You realize, here, faith isn't just about eternity. It's about making sure your roof doesn't leak, your children stay healthy, and your business doesn't collapse tomorrow. But there's tension. Some shrug at rituals, muttering, "As long as the emperor's happy." Others take it all too seriously, convinced that skipping one sacrifice might doom the city. Historians still argue whether Roman religion was genuine devotion or mostly social obligation. Was it heartfelt belief or just keeping up appearances? And then there's the humor. Imagine a Roman baker sighing as he burns yet another loaf and mutters, "Sorry, Vesta, goddess of the hearth. I swear it wasn't my fault this time." Or a soldier grumbling, "Great, Mars wants more sacrifices, but my paycheck is already late." Even in the most sacred moments, humans never quite lose the knack for complaining. You wander into the Colosseum, its arches looming, the crowd roaring. Here, too, religion lurks. Gladiatorial games often honored the dead and appeased the gods. Sacrifice and spectacle blurred until faith and entertainment became inseparable. And you can't help but notice the irony. A society that prayed for peace also cheered for blood, convinced both pleased the divine. As the torches gutter and the crowd disperses, you leave Rome's streets behind. You can still smell incense, hear the chants, and feel the weight of a city that treated gods like political allies, household guardians, and cosmic referees all at once. The empire stretches ahead, roads spiraling outward, carrying not only soldiers and merchants, but also new gods, new cults, new beliefs. And somewhere in that swirl, a seed of change waits, quiet now, but soon to grow louder than Rome itself. The marble arches of Rome dissolve, and you find yourself beneath the canopy of a Bodhi tree. Its branches spread wide leaves whispering in the breeze like 1,000 tiny bells. The air is still, almost holding its breath, and in the shade sits a figure, calm, unmoving, serene. Siddhartha Gautama, the man who will become the Buddha, sits in meditation. You lower yourself to the ground, the roots rough beneath you, and feel the hush of history around you. This story begins with wealth, palaces, and every comfort you could imagine. Siddhartha had silk sheets, banquets, and musicians at his beck and call. Yet he looked out beyond the palace walls and saw sickness, aging, and death. Imagine living in a bubble your whole life, then one day realizing, oh, this doesn't end well. It was like finding out your favorite video game has no save points. Mainstream fact. Historians agree that around the 5th, 4th century BCE, Siddhartha renounced his princely life and began seeking a path beyond suffering. He tried extreme fasting, sleeping on nails, and meditating until his ribs showed. Yet none of it brought peace. Only when he let go of extremes, neither indulgence nor punishment, did he find the middle way. Now, for the quirky tidbit, some Buddhist legends claim that while Siddhartha meditated beneath the Bodhi tree, demons tried to distract him. They threw storms, sent armies, even conjured seductive dancers to break his concentration. He didn't flinch. Imagine sitting in meditation while your brain screams, "Order pizza," and check your notifications. But you just breathe. Historians still argue whether these demons were real visions or symbolic of inner struggles. But the lesson endures. Peace comes from within. The night deepens, and you watch Siddhartha touch the earth with his hand, calling it to witness his determination. In that moment, he awakens, not to a God above, but to a truth within. Life is suffering. Suffering has causes, but there is a path beyond it. The 4 noble truths take shape like lanterns glowing in the dark. The 8-fold path stretches out like stepping stones across a stream. Right view, right intention, right speech, and so on. It's less about worship, more about practice, an instruction manual for the restless human mind. You travel with the Buddha as he begins to teach. He speaks softly, in simple words, yet crowds gather. Farmers, merchants, kings, and beggars lean in, drawn by the idea that enlightenment isn't reserved for the powerful. You don't need temples or gold. You need awareness, compassion, and discipline. Imagine the shock, a religion without demanding gods. Just a mirror held up to your own mind. The atmosphere shifts. Monks shave their heads, wrap themselves in saffron robes, and wander from village to village. Bowls in hand, they live on the generosity of others, not to hoard wealth, but to remind themselves that clinging is the root of suffering. You walk with them, hearing the clink of rice falling into bowls, smelling the spice of lentils cooking in small huts. Faith here isn't loud or lavish. It's quiet, portable, and profoundly personal. And yet, humor still seeps in. Imagine a novice monk sneaking an extra mango into his robe, whispering, "It's for enlightenment, I swear." Or a villager muttering, "Great, more monks asking for rice. Can't the enlightened ones grow their own crops?" Even the most serene paths leave room for jokes. Historians still argue whether the Buddha was strictly historical or partly legendary, his life polished into parable. Was enlightenment a single night under the Bodhi tree, or a lifetime of gradual realization? You'll never know for sure, but that's part of the draw. The mystery deepens the calm. As you sit beneath the same tree, you feel the stillness seep into you. The chants of monks drift on the wind, rhythmic and soothing. The Bodhi leaves tremble, catching the starlight, and you realize the journey of belief has shifted. From sacrifices and bargains with the gods, you've now stepped into a world that asks not for offerings, but for mindfulness. And as your eyes grow heavy, the shade of the tree feels endless, as though you too could rest here forever. The rustling leaves of the Bodhi tree fade, and suddenly your feet crunch on desert sand. The air is dry, sharp, and full of echoes, songs, cries, and the creak of tents under the relentless sun. Before you stretches a people on the move, the Israelites, carrying not just belongings, but promises carved deep into their story. You walk with them, dust in your mouth, the heat pressing down, and still they march, because faith says there is a land waiting, a covenant to fulfill. The covenant is simple, yet immense. You, the chosen people, walk with one God, and in return, that God walks with you. Unlike Egypt's many deities, or Greece's bickering immortals, this God doesn't share the stage. He thunders from mountaintops, splits seas, and lays down rules, not open to negotiation. Imagine being at Sinai, lightning cracking, smoke billowing, and Moses trudging down with stone tablets that basically say, "Here are 10 non-negotiables, sign here." You'd probably nod and keep quiet. Mainstream fact. The Torah, especially the first 5 books, formed the backbone of Jewish tradition. Laws on food, ritual, justice, and ethics were written with painstaking care. Archaeological finds, like fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls, show how seriously these words were preserved, copied, and debated. They weren't just rules, they were lifelines. And here's a quirky tidbit. One ancient tradition held that blowing a ram's horn, the shofar, could shake the heavens. Its piercing sound wasn't just an alarm clock for festivals, but a weapon against evil. Picture standing in battle, nerves tight, then someone blasts a horn so loud it makes the enemy rethink their career choices. Historians still argue whether these rituals were mainly symbolic or whether people believed the sound itself had cosmic power. The journey isn't easy. You feel the hunger gnaw, hear the complaints ripple. Why did we leave Egypt again? It's the eternal travel group grumble. Everybody wants freedom. Nobody likes the long walk. Yet hope persists, tied to stories of manna falling from heaven, water springing from rocks, and a land flowing with milk and honey. You taste the dust, but also the promise, sweet and heavy as ripe figs. You stop by a tent where scribes ink words on parchment. The law isn't vague. It reaches into daily life. From how you cook to how you rest, from debts to forgiveness, everything is wrapped in sacred rhythm. Religion here is a constant reminder. You're part of a people, not just an individual. Every ritual meal, every Sabbath candle, ties you back into a web that stretches across generations. Humor, of course. Imagine a shepherd rolling his eyes after hearing about yet another purity law. Wait, you're telling me my goat counts as unclean now? He's the same goat as yesterday. Or a wife smirking at her husband. Moses says no work on the Sabbath, so guess who's not fixing the roof this weekend? Even the sternest rules invite playful resistance. Historians still argue whether the Israelites' wanderings were exactly as described in Scripture, or whether later writers shaped them into a national myth. Was there a literal exodus, or is it the collective memory of smaller migrations woven into one powerful story? Either way, the impact is undeniable. The covenant idea of one God and one people bound together becomes a template, that echoes through centuries. As the sun sinks, fires glow across the desert camp. Children curl into blankets, elders murmur prayers, and somewhere a ram's horn sounds, long and low. The desert wind carries it, eerie and strong, across the dunes. You close your eyes, the sand cool under your hands, and feel the weight of wandering. This isn't just a religion, it's a journey of survival, a long walk toward belonging, carried by stories that refuse to die. The desert wind settles, and now you find yourself in the hush of an underground chamber. The air is damp, lit only by trembling candle flames. Shadows dance on rough stone walls where simple drawings of fish and doves mark the presence of a secret gathering. You're in the catacombs beneath Rome, and the sound around you is soft, prayers whispered in fear and in hope. This is where Christianity begins to take root, not in grand temples, but in hidden rooms, carried by people who risk everything just to break bread together. You kneel beside them as a loaf is lifted, broken, and shared. The wine poured is red in the dim light, and every sip feels more dangerous than it looks. Out in the streets, being caught with these rituals could mean death. Down here, though, the danger only strengthens the bond. You feel it, faith woven out of fragility, trust made stronger by risk. Mainstream fact: early Christians were often persecuted in the Roman Empire, accused of atheism, ironically, because they refused to honor Rome's gods. Yet by the 4th century, Christianity transformed from outlawed sect to the empire's official religion, thanks in part to Constantine's conversion. Imagine the whiplash. One decade you're hunted, the next your faith is painted on palace walls. Here's your quirky tidbit. The fish symbol, the ichthys, wasn't just decorative graffiti. It was a secret handshake in plain sight. If one stranger drew a curve in the dirt, the other could complete it into a fish. Boom. You've just confirmed a fellow believer without saying a word. Think of it as the world's first low-tech social network. Historians still argue whether it was used mainly for secrecy or also for teaching. But either way, it left its mark. You sit through a reading of a letter, Paul's words, full of encouragement, urging communities to keep faith, love one another, and endure trials. The listeners nod, some crying quietly, others gripping hands. For them, this isn't philosophy, it's oxygen, a promise that suffering has meaning, that death is not the end, that resurrection is more than rumor. Outside, Rome bustles with festivals and sacrifices. Statues gleam, incense rises, crowds cheer. Down here, the contrast couldn't be sharper. These small gatherings don't look powerful. No marble columns, no legions, no treasure. And yet, you sense the strange gravity pulling them forward in their quiet prayers, in their hymns sung so softly you almost miss them. There's a resilience that feels harder than stone. Of course, humor sneaks in even here. Imagine a nervous new convert whispering too loudly, "Wait, are we drinking blood?" And everyone hissing, "Shh, it's symbolic." Or someone smuggling bread past a Roman guard, muttering, "Nope, nothing suspicious here, just carbs." Even in fear, laughter survives. Historians still argue whether Jesus' resurrection was historical, symbolic, or myth reshaped by faith. For believers, the answer doesn't change the impact. Hope stronger than empire, compassion stronger than sword. Whether skeptic or devotee, you feel the pull of the story, the way it refuses to die, the way it keeps flickering like these stubborn little candles. The meeting ends. The breadcrumbs are brushed away, the wine cups hidden, the candles snuffed. Silence returns, heavy and holy. You climb back into the world above, blinking in the torchlight of Roman streets. Yet something lingers, a sense of quiet defiance, a whisper that faith can thrive even in darkness. As you walk away, you glance back at the sealed door. Somewhere behind it, songs are still being sung, soft and steady, carrying across centuries. You realize you've just witnessed the fragile beginnings of a faith that will one day crown kings, spark wars, and inspire cathedrals that touch the clouds. But for now, it's just bread, wine, whispers, and courage in the dark. The damp chill of the catacombs fades, and suddenly the desert air wraps around you again, hot, dry, and humming with possibility. Sand crunches beneath your feet, camels groan in the distance, and the call of merchants drifts on the wind. You're in 7th century Arabia, where the dunes roll like endless waves, and caravans weave threads of trade across the land. In this vast expanse, a single voice begins to change the rhythm of the world. You follow that voice to a cave on Mount Hira, where a man named Muhammad sits in meditation. The night is still, the stars sharp as daggers, when suddenly he hears words not his own. Recite. The voice shakes him, terrifies him, but also fills him with something unshakable. You sit on the cold stone floor, heart racing, as verses of the Quran spill into the world for the first time. The sound feels less like human speech and more like the desert itself, finding its tongue. Mainstream fact: Muslims believe the Quran was revealed over 23 years, shaping not just a religion, but an entire civilization. Its verses guided prayer, law, and community, eventually uniting tribes that had been feuding for centuries. Within 100 years, Islam stretched from Spain to India, carried on horseback and by sea. Now here's your quirky tidbit. One of Muhammad's companions, Bilal, became the first muezzin, chosen to call believers to prayer because of his powerful voice. Imagine a voice so rich, it echoes across sand dunes and makes everyone pause mid-barter, like the ancient world's best alarm clock. Historians still argue whether early Islam spread mainly by persuasion or political strength. But either way, Bilal's call turned 5 moments of each day into anchors of faith. You walk through Medina, streets buzzing with new energy. The faithful gather shoulder to shoulder. No marble temples, no golden idols, just open space and a rhythm of words. Islam rejects the old pantheon of tribal gods, replacing them with the simplicity of one God, merciful and just. No statues, no images, only the power of the spoken word, written later into a book that millions would memorize by heart. Life shifts. The Quran speaks not only of prayer, but of charity, honesty in trade, care for the poor, justice for the vulnerable. You watch as a merchant sets aside coins for the needy before counting his own. You see a widow receiving food from neighbors as part of zakat, the practice of almsgiving. Faith here is practical, woven into every contract, every handshake, every meal. Still, humor survives. Imagine a camel driver muttering, 5 prayers a day? My camel already thinks I take too many breaks. Or a wife raising an eyebrow as her husband claims he'll fast during Ramadan, only for her to catch him sneaking dates at sunset. Even in devotion, human nature stays delightfully human. But belief isn't without struggle. Battles erupt. Badr, Uhud, conflicts that test whether this new community can endure. You hear the clang of swords, the shouts of men, the cries of victory and loss. Yet through it all, Muhammad's voice reminds them the goal isn't conquest for conquest's sake, but unity under faith. Historians still argue whether Islam spread more through sincere conversion or through political necessity. But you sense it was both, heart and law braided together. Night falls, and you hear it. The adhan, the call to prayer. The words float through the dark, echoing off stone and sand. God is greater. The sound is steady, reassuring, an anchor in the endless shifting of the desert. You close your eyes, listening, and feel the cadence settle into your bones. Here, belief is not hidden in caves or catacombs anymore. It walks openly in markets, rides with caravans, echoes in palaces, and though divisions and debates will come about law, leadership, interpretation, this moment feels pure, a river just beginning to flow. You step back into the desert night, stars blazing above, and realize the journey of faith has carried you from hidden whispers to a voice so powerful it shakes empires. The desert winds fade, replaced by the pulse of drums. You're standing in a clearing beneath a vast African sky, the night warm, the fire bright, and every beat feels like it thrums straight into your chest. Men and women move in circles, their bodies painted with patterns of ochre and ash. Masks gleam in the firelight, elongated faces, animal horns, wide staring eyes. This is not theater. This is presence. Ancestors, spirits, gods, they're all here, woven into rhythm and movement, unseen but undeniably felt. You watch as an elder raises a carved staff, voice carrying over the drums. He speaks not to the living alone, but to the dead, to those who walked before. The people answer as one, their voices swelling, and you realize, here, faith is family. The ancestors are not gone. They guide, protect, warn, and occasionally scold, like eternal grandparents, keeping an eye on you from the other side. Mainstream fact: many African traditional religions emphasize ancestor veneration. Archaeological and anthropological studies show shrines, offerings, and rituals dedicated to lineage, reinforcing bonds across generations. Far from being primitive, these systems preserved law, morality, and history in societies without written records. And here's your quirky tidbit. In parts of West Africa, diviners sometimes use cowrie shells or even carved wooden figures to speak for spirits. Tossing shells onto the ground, they read the patterns like divine text messages. Imagine asking if your journey will go well, and the shells clatter out a message that says, "Try again tomorrow." Historians still argue whether these practices were purely symbolic, or if communities truly believed the objects carried voices. You wander into a village at dawn. Women grind grain to the hum of a work song, while a small shrine at the edge of the compound receives the day's first offering: millet, beer, maybe a splash of palm wine. The smell is sharp, earthy. Children pause their play to drop pebbles at the shrine, as if even their games must nod to the invisible world. Faith here is not confined to special days. It flows through planting, harvesting, births, and funerals. Nearby, a masked dancer enters, representing a spirit of the forest. His steps are heavy, his costume rattling with shells. The crowd hushes, some in awe, some in playful fear. For them, the mask is not just a costume, it is the spirit itself walking among them. You shiver, not because you're cold, but because the line between human and divine feels so thin you could stumble across it by accident. And yet, humor is never far away. Imagine a goat wandering into the middle of a sacred dance, chewing on a mask's tassels while everyone tries not to laugh, or a child asking loudly, "Grandfather, why does the spirit sound like Uncle Kofi?" The elder glares, the drummers speed up, and the ritual continues, dignity wobbling, but never quite collapsing. Historians still argue whether African religions should be described as polytheistic, monotheistic, or something entirely different. Often there is a supreme creator God, distant and vast, but everyday life revolves around ancestors and local spirits. Maybe the labels don't fit. Maybe the point is that belief here is not about categories, but about connection to land, to family, to memory. As the night deepens, the drums soften and the fire burns low. You look up. The stars are so thick, it feels like the heavens spilled silver dust across the sky. Voices chant softly, prayers rising with the smoke. You feel held, not just by the living around you, but by invisible generations. Each beat of the drum a heartbeat reaching back through time. And you realize this is religion not as escape, but as grounding. It roots you in place, ties you to those who came before, and assures you that even when you're gone, the rhythm will go on. The drums continue as you drift, half dreaming, carried deeper into the journey of faith. The night of drums and firelight fades, and now you feel wind sweeping across an open plain. The sky is enormous, painted with clouds that look like bison herds drifting above. You are in the Americas, long before skyscrapers or highways, where every hill, river, and canyon is alive with spirit. You walk softly across the grasslands, because here, the land itself is sacred, and to step carelessly is to ignore the voices hidden in stone, water, and sky. A circle of tipis rises ahead, smoke curling upward into the blue. You hear the steady beat of a hand drum, slower than the African rhythms, but no less deep, like the heart of the earth itself. Men and women gather in a wide circle, elders chanting, children listening with wide eyes. The story being told isn't just entertainment, it's a map of meaning, tying the people to the bison, the wind, the sun, the sacred and the practical blur, until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Mainstream fact: many indigenous peoples across North and South America tied rituals to nature and animals, often linking survival directly with reverence. For example, Plains tribes honored the bison through ceremonies like the buffalo dance, recognizing that taking life for food demanded gratitude and respect. This wasn't quaint symbolism. It was the moral glue of a hunting society. Here's your quirky tidbit. The Inca of South America believed mountains, called apis, were alive and full of spirit. Villagers would sometimes feed these mountains with coca leaves or chicha beer. Picture standing at the base of a giant peak, nervously pouring out your drink and whispering, "Please don't avalanche on me." Historians still argue whether these rituals were acts of devotion, diplomacy with nature, or both. You travel with a small group crossing the plains. At night, they pause to smoke tobacco in a sacred pipe, passing it carefully around the circle. Each puff isn't casual. It's prayer carried on breath, smoke rising to mingle with the stars. The silence that follows is heavier than words, a reminder that the universe listens. You inhale the scent, sharp and earthy, and feel the weight of that quiet. Further north, you find longhouses, where stories stretch as far as winter nights. Tales of trickster spirits, like coyote or raven, swirl with laughter. These beings steal, joke, stumble, and occasionally teach lessons through their chaos. And yes, even religion needs comic relief. Imagine the first storyteller adding, "And then Raven fell flat on his beak, while children giggle and parents shake their heads. Life here is ritual, woven into survival. A hunter pauses before loosing an arrow, whispering thanks to the spirit of the deer. A farmer plants maize with songs, asking the earth to be generous. A healer chews herbs, not just for medicine, but to honor the spirit that gave them power. There's no separation, no religious life versus daily life. Every act, from eating to building, vibrates with spirit. Historians still argue how much of these traditions we can truly reconstruct, since so much was suppressed or reshaped by colonization. Are the stories we have faithful echoes of ancient beliefs or fragments reassembled by later generations? What's clear is that the reverence for land and life ran deep, shaping cultures across continents. And humor, always. Imagine a hunter returning empty-handed, shrugging, "Guess the deer's spirit outran me again," or a child tugging at her mother's sleeve, asking, "Why does the trickster always get away with it?" And the mother replying, "Because even spirits need someone to blame." As the sun dips behind mountains, you sit with the people around a fire. Sparks rise, voices chant, and the ground itself feels alive. You close your eyes and feel small but connected, part of a web that stretches from soil to sky. The land hums beneath you, not just dirt and stone, but sacred presence. And in that hum, you sense the journey pulling onward. Cathedrals and crusades wait ahead, but for now you linger on the plain, wrapped in the warmth of fire and the steady rhythm of belief carried by wind, animals, and earth. The wide plains fall away, and suddenly you're surrounded by stone arches and stained glass that glow like captured rainbows. The air is cool, echoing with footsteps and whispers as you step into a medieval cathedral. Candles flicker, incense curls upward, and choirs rehearse hymns that ripple through the vaulted ceilings like waves of sound. Here in medieval Europe, faith is everywhere, painted, carved, sung, and fought over. You kneel on cold stone, and it's impossible not to feel small. These cathedrals weren't built to comfort. They were built to overwhelm. Every column points your gaze upward, reminding you where power truly lies, or at least where the architects wanted you to look. Mainstream fact: the medieval church wasn't just about worship. It was the center of law, education, and politics. Monasteries preserved knowledge through illuminated manuscripts, while universities, often church-founded, trained scholars in philosophy, theology, and medicine. Faith wasn't a weekend ritual. It was the skeleton of society. But here's your quirky tidbit: relics, bones, scraps of cloth, even supposed drops of holy blood were believed to hold miraculous power. Towns competed to attract pilgrims with their relic collections. Imagine medieval advertising: "Visit our church, home of Saint Somebody's pinky toe." Historians still argue whether relics were genuine or shameless scams, but either way, they drew crowds and coin. You step into a monastery cloister, the hush broken only by quills scratching parchment. Monks bend over desks, copying texts by hand, eyes straining by candlelight. Their marginal doodles betray them, though: tiny rabbits jousting with snails, or monks riding dragons. Even in the most solemn work, humor found its way in, reminding you that humanity always sneaks past piety. Yet faith wasn't always quiet. Across the continent, armies march beneath banners marked with crosses. The Crusades roar, holy wars promised as pilgrimages with swords. You hear the clash of steel, the cries of battle, the clash of ideals. Was it faith, greed, politics, or all three tangled together? Historians still argue, and likely always will. Closer to home, mystics write of visions. Hildegard of Bingen describes divine music blazing across the sky, while others speak of unions with God so intense they blur the line between body and spirit. In their words, you hear both ecstasy and doubt, longing and fear. Religion here is not one voice but many, priests, knights, nuns, poets, all claiming truth, all wrestling with questions. Humor even seeps into sermons. Picture a weary peasant grumbling after Mass. Great. The priest says, giving more tithes will buy me a shorter stay in purgatory. Does he take goats as payment? Or a monk whispering to his friend, if chanting longer means more holiness, then Brother Thomas must be a saint already. The contradictions are sharp. Faith builds hospitals and schools, but it also burns heretics. Cathedrals rise like mountains of stone, while peasants scrape through fields. Yet, through it all, belief is the air everyone breathes, whether in prayer, politics, or punishment. God is invoked constantly, shaping the rhythm of daily life. You sit in the back of a cathedral as the organ swells. Light filters through stained glass, painting saints and angels across the floor. The music rises, overwhelming, and for a moment you forget the noise of war and politics. All that exists is sound and color, washing over you like a tide. You close your eyes, caught between awe and unease, knowing that here in the medieval world, faith is never simple. It is soaring, suffocating, beautiful, and brutal all at once. The hymn fades, and you step outside. The streets are crowded, beggars by the church doors, merchants shouting, friars preaching. The cathedral bells toll, echoing through the city, a constant reminder that God's voice, or at least the church's version of it, reaches into every corner of life. And with each toll, you feel the story pulling forward toward new lands, new faiths, new blends of belief, waiting just ahead. The bells of Europe fade into the hush of bamboo groves. Lantern light flickers along narrow paths, and you hear the soft gurgle of water spilling over stones. You've stepped into East Asia, where faith doesn't roar from pulpits or crash in crusades. It whispers in gardens, flows in tea, and lingers in the pause between breaths. Here, Tao, Shinto, and Zen shape life not with thunder, but with stillness. You wander into a Taoist temple, the air heavy with incense, coils of smoke spiral upward like dragons curling into the rafters. Priests move slowly, robes rustling, reading from texts that speak of the Tao, the way. It isn't a god to obey, but a path to follow, a current to drift with. You're reminded of rivers, bending easily, yet carving valleys over centuries. The Tao teaches that sometimes the most powerful action is no action at all, which, if you've ever procrastinated successfully, you've unknowingly practiced Taoism. Mainstream fact, Laozi's Tao Te Ching, written around the 4th century BCE, remains one of the most translated texts in the world. With just a few thousand words, it shaped centuries of thought, politics, and art across China. Scholars still debate whether Laozi was one man or a collection of voices, but the philosophy remains slippery, as if refusing to be pinned down. Now, for a quirky tidbit, Taoist alchemists once tried to brew elixirs of immortality, mixing mercury, jade, and gold into potions. Many of these life-extending drinks were fatal. Imagine gulping down a shiny concoction and realizing too late that your afterlife just started early. Historians still argue whether these experiments were sincere science, or spiritual symbolism gone sideways. You leave the temple and step into Japan. A red torii gate rises before you, marking the threshold to a Shinto shrine. The gate itself feels like a pause, a reminder you're moving from ordinary ground into sacred space. The path is lined with stone lanterns, fox statues, and the whisper of wind through cedars. People bow, clap twice, and ring bells, calling the attention of the kami, spirits tied to nature, ancestors, and places. In Shinto, the divine is not distant. It's in the waterfall's roar, the rice fields' shimmer, the mountain's silhouette. Further on, you slip off your shoes and kneel in a Zen temple. The space is bare, tatami mats, sliding doors, a garden of raked gravel outside. A monk sits motionless, breathing slowly, eyes half closed. No chanting, no incense, just silence stretched thin until you can almost hear your own heartbeat. Zen isn't about gods. It's about catching glimpses of truth in the ordinary. A tea ceremony, a brushstroke of ink, the curve of a rock in a garden, all become doorways into peace. Humor survives, even here. A Zen koan asks, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" Imagine a medieval student actually trying, slapping the air in frustration while the master chuckles, or a Taoist farmer shrugging at a neighbor's complaint. Bad luck today? Maybe. Ask me again tomorrow. Even in solemn traditions, laughter flows like water. Historians still argue whether Zen simplicity was truly accessible to all or more of a refined practice for elites with time to meditate in gardens. Yet standing here, you sense the universality of it. Anyone can pause, breathe, and notice the way sunlight pools on the floorboards. That, in itself, feels holy. You sip tea, the bowl warm in your hands. The taste is earthy, the steam rising in slow spirals. Nothing grand happens. No lightning bolts, no booming voices, just warmth, silence, and a fleeting sense that you're exactly where you need to be. And maybe that's the whole point. Faith here is less about conquering heaven and more about noticing earth. As evening falls, lanterns glow along temple paths, foxfires flicker in rice paddies, and monks ring bells that echo across valleys. The sound is gentle but steady, a reminder that peace doesn't always roar. It often whispers. You step away, breath slowing, eyes softer, as if the whole journey of religion has exhaled here, teaching you to sit still before moving again. The temple bells fade into a new rhythm, the low hum of trains, the glow of phone screens, the clatter of city streets. You're in the modern world now, where belief no longer hides in caves or whispers under trees. It streams through headphones, scrolls across apps, and fills lecture halls. People still search for meaning, but the landscape looks different. Fewer temples of stone, more temples of thought, meditation studios, and online forums where seekers gather from every time zone. You walk through a crowded station, neon signs flickering overhead. A man in a suit scrolls through his phone, pausing on a mindfulness app. A woman in jeans ties beads around her wrist. Buddhist mala, or just a fashion choice. A group of teens argue whether horoscopes are silly or secretly accurate. Religion in the modern age is fragmented, eclectic, sometimes contradictory, but always alive. Mainstream fact. Studies show that while traditional church attendance has declined in many countries, spirituality hasn't disappeared. Instead, it has shifted into yoga, meditation, self-help movements, and digital communities. The quest for calm and peace continues, only with new labels. Quirky tidbit? In the 20th century, groups like the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster popped up partly as satire. Believers, or Pastafarians, donned colanders on their heads to protest rigid definitions of faith. It's funny, absurd, and yet it highlights a truth. Even parody becomes a mirror of what people long to question. Historians still argue whether these movements should be considered genuine religions or cultural commentary dressed in noodles. You wander into a bookstore. Shelves groan under titles. Ancient philosophy repackaged as 10 Steps to Happiness. Mindfulness guides with pastel covers. Biographies of gurus both revered and controversial. Faith here wears many costumes, from science-flavored spirituality to the promise that the right breathing technique can change your life. Some roll their eyes. Others swear by it. Outside, a meditation group gathers in a park. Mats spread across grass. City noise buzzing in the distance. They breathe slowly, in unison, like a tiny island of calm in the chaos. A jogger slows to watch, smirks, then shrugs and joins. Religion today doesn't always demand vows. It often invites experiments. Try this mantra. Try this ritual. See if it fits. And humor, of course, thrives. Imagine someone sighing after a long meditation. I think I reached enlightenment. Or maybe just a really good nap. Or scrolling social media and seeing a meme. When life closes a door, open it again. It's a door. That's how they work. Even in our restless age, jokes soften the weight of searching. Historians still argue whether the digital age is fragmenting religion into irrelevance or democratizing it into something new. Is faith fading, or is it evolving, breaking down into smaller, personal pieces we can carry in our pockets? You can't be sure, but as you ride a train past glowing skyscrapers, you sense that the hunger hasn't changed. People still long for meaning, still crave connection, still reach for calm in a noisy world. The train slows, the crowd thins, and you find yourself sitting quietly by a window. The city lights shimmer like constellations, each one a tiny prayer. In the dark, you breathe, slow and steady, realizing that your journey through belief has stretched from fire-lit caves to fiber-optic cables. The gods have changed names. The rituals have shifted. But the questions remain the same. Why are we here? How should we live? And where do we find peace? Your eyes grow heavy, lulled by the hum of the train. The answers may never come in full, but the search itself is the story. And tonight, that story is enough. And now, as the journey settles, let your breath slow. The trains roll into silence. The candles burn low. The chants fade into memory. You've walked through deserts and gardens, sat under trees and inside cathedrals, drifted down rivers and crossed plains. Each step carried questions, and each answer only deepened the mystery. Yet somehow, that mystery feels less heavy now. It's softer, like a blanket wrapped around your shoulders. You picture the sparks of the first fireside stories, the rising sun on the Nile, the hush beneath the Bodhi tree, the laughter of trickster spirits, the glow of stained glass, the whisper of Zen gardens, and finally, the quiet hum of the present moment. They blur together, a long thread woven through human history, tying one restless generation to the next. The world outside your room might still be noisy, full of its own arguments and alarms. But here, in this story, there's a steady calm. You are part of something vast and ancient, but you're also here, now, breathing, safe. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on a slow river. You don't need to solve the questions tonight. You don't need to carry the weight of the centuries. The story has carried you gently, and now it sets you down. So rest. The journey continues tomorrow, and the gods, whether fierce, playful, or silent, will wait. For now, the only sacred act is sleep. Good night.